Okay, another activity now. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to put me on pause. And we're going to think about why children need foster placements, why children enter the care system. So just like the last activity, I want you to put me on pause and try and list as many ideas or things that you can think of. Okay, so pause me now. Okay, so children become looked after due to maltreatment or abuse. So children who've been abused physically, sexually, emotionally, who've been neglected is our main categories. You will cover all this on your safeguarding training. So if you've already done your safeguarding training, this is a bit of a catch-up. If not, you will cover this in more depth when you do your safeguarding training. Parents' drug or alcohol misuse leading to maltreatment. Parents' mental health issues leading to maltreatment. Parents' medical illness. Conflict within the family, domestic violence, where significant harm is being caused to the child. And when we say harm, we're not just talking about the child's physical violence towards the child. If children are witnessing, hearing domestic violence, that is harmful to children. Sometimes parents request for children to come into care for all sorts of different reasons. I'm thinking of a lady once who presented herself and said, I can't make the changes to my life that I need to. I'm not in a place to start tackling my addictions, to start addressing my life and changing my life, but my children don't deserve this. And this woman came to us and said, please make my children safe. And that really stood out to me, because I thought, actually, you know, people might be quick to judge you, but what you are doing is thinking about what your children need, and you're saying, I'm not what's best for these children, so please find something that will help them. So parents request for all sorts of different reasons. Sometimes we have children who come and request to be brought into the looked after system. Sometimes there's no living family members available, so children can't be placed in a connected persons placement, so they need to come into mainstream fostering. Sometimes we have children placing themselves at risk or being exploited and put at risk to such a degree where we need to secure them, or we need to do something to keep them safe. We need to intervene. We have a lot of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in Hull. You ask children. If you're interested in providing placements for them, we would give you some extra training, some extra information. But we have a team that's just concerned with you ask children. We'd really welcome that interest. So speak to your assessing social worker if you think you'd like to provide placements for unaccompanied asylum seekers. And sometimes we have cultural issues which create a risk. So female genital mutilation, children that are at risk of honour-based violence or forced marriage, and we need to step in and protect those children. What I will say to you is, all of these issues on these lists, such as drug or alcohol misuse, mental health, are not reason alone to bring a child into the looked after system. So we would not bring a child into care just because their parents have mental health issues. It must ultimately mean that it's led to one of these things. Okay, so the issues, the drug use, the mental health difficulties have led to that child being neglected, or have meant that child's being physically abused. We would not remove a child unless harm has been caused or is likely to be caused to them. So, which just highlights to you that all the children coming into your care are going to have been through traumatic experiences. And we're going to look in session 4 more at the impact of trauma, but please don't ever underestimate how difficult these things have been. And obviously for all our children, they've experienced separation and loss. The separation from the family and the loss of that family. And also, just because they've been in an abusive environment doesn't mean to say it's not a loss, doesn't mean to say they're going to be relieved, because if that's all they've ever known, they're losing that familiarity, they're losing everything they've ever known. And it's going to feel very, very scary. Just coming into your home, a nice warm home with food available and toys and a bath, doesn't mean these children are just suddenly going to feel safe. It's a long road ahead of them. So how children become looked after, again, I won't spend a lot of time on this because you will cover it in your safeguarding training, but some children come in due to emergency protection orders or police protection orders. So when social workers or the police go out and they encounter situations where a child needs to be protected and made safe immediately, i.e. we haven't got time to refer it to children's social care, we haven't got time to get to courts, we need to make that child safe right now, there's certain time-limited orders that can be put in place to support that child. So what I would say to you though is with emergency protection orders or police protection orders, this is a child who's been taken immediately out of their home in an emergency situation. As brand new foster carers, we don't recommend taking those emergency placements because you will have very little information on that child. And as a foster carer, it's really important to the success of a placement that you have as much information as possible. So we have lots of experienced carers out there who are good at taking emergencies and have the experience to be able to work with these children. As a brand new carer, we recommend taking planned placements to start with, but your fostering social worker will guide you through that. Then we have voluntary care order, which is known as a Section 20 order. So the voluntary care order is where parents have consented to their child being brought into the looked after system. They've signed to say, yes, my child can be placed in foster care. With a voluntary care order, 100% of parental responsibility, PR, is held by the parents still. So the local authority does not have any parental responsibility. And in essence, the parents can remove their child from care at any time. Generally, in most cases, a social worker would then step in and seek another order to keep that child in care. It's just... And voluntary care orders should also not be there for a long time. We should be, looking at something more secure, more permanent, whatever that plan may be. Then social workers can go to court and seek interim care orders. So interim care orders, what they do is they give some legal parental responsibility to the local authority. So then parental responsibility is shared between the local authority and the parents. And an interim care order basically is there while children's services can carry out their assessments, do whatever they need to do before they present back to court with their full plan, with their long-term plan. So then what they might seek is a full care order, a Section 21. And with Section 31, and with a Section 31, again, parental responsibility is shared between the local authority and the parents. We have children who were remanded to local authority care called concordant policy. So for some of our children who were arrested and potential for them to be put into a secure unit on remand, we do have a scheme where children can be remanded to the care of a foster carer. If you're interested in that, speak to your assessing social worker. And then other legal statuses that we have children who have a placement order, and a placement order means that the courts have granted the local authority permission to seek an adoptive placement for this child. So they have endorsed a plan of adoption and this child is now moving towards that plan. And we also have children who are placed for adoption. So a child, before they are adopted, is placed with their adoptive family for a time period before that adoption can become legal. Okay, the important thing to say about all of these is that you as a foster carer do not have parental responsibility in any of these situations. So wherever your child is on that list, you do not have any parental responsibility as a foster carer. Parental responsibility will only be with parents or local authority or both. Now, what I'm going to go on to talk to you about in another session is something called delegated authority. And delegated authority sets out exactly what you can and cannot agree to as a foster carer, as someone who doesn't have parental responsibility. But I will come on to that later. So don't sit there thinking, I don't have parental responsibility, I'm not going to be able to do anything. There are measures in place to kind of overcome that. So why do we need you then? This is an out-of-date statistic. I'm waiting for updated numbers. But as of the 13th of November last year, we had 823 children in Hull who were looked after in care. This might be a bit small for you to read on my screen, but obviously you've got your slides in front of you. These are the categories of why these children were brought in. I don't like this list, basically because it's got things on it like low income, which don't really make sense, because we wouldn't remove a child just because the family were on a low income. So I can't really explain that. But what I want to draw your attention to is this figure here, the biggest figure, which is 561, abuse or neglect. This is where our children are. So you will see that the majority of our children, 346, are with a foster carer, a mainstream foster carer on long-term fostering. The other big numbers come to our connected persons carers, and the next biggest number is foster carers who are not long-term. Okay, so not long-term placement. So that's in Hull. Again, this is an old statistic, and I wait for people to update me with new figures. But just to give you a rough idea, in August last year, we had 329 fostering households. So not foster carers, but households. And 188 of those were our mainstream carers, 113 were connected persons, and 28 of those were our support care carers. Legislation that I need to draw your attention to. I'm not going to go over the Children Act 1989 and 2004 because you'll cover those in your safeguarding training. But I want to draw your attention to the National Minimum Standards. So the National Minimum Standards is a set of standards which state the bare minimum that you as a foster carer are expected to provide. It also sets out the minimum that you should expect of the fostering team and the local authority for whom you foster. I urge you to familiarise yourself with the National Minimum Standards, because the National Minimum Standards are what you are being assessed against. And so when you're being assessed, what your assessing social worker is looking at is, what evidence do we have that these people can meet these minimum standards, the least that we expect? And equally, if there's ever something that you're not sure about, or you don't feel that something's going as it should, and you've got them to refer to say, well, actually, I'm not getting the minimum that I should get. So the National Minimum Standards are really important. They're really easy to read. Each standard has a heading, then a little box with a summary, and then it's bullet points. So they are easy to read, and they're easily accessible. Just Google National Minimum Standards for foster care and they're on there. So please have a look at the National Minimum Standards.